Not your average tabletop. Woohoo!
Welcome to Not Your Average Tabletop. I'm Zach.
I'm Mac.
Today we're giving our first impressions of Andromeda's Edge, which is a pretty huge game. Pretty huge box, anyway.
It's a big boy.
MaKayla was very, very excited. She always gets very excited about these huge, huge boxes in games. It's her favorite thing in the world.
It's my favorite thing in the world to say, where are you going to put that?
That is your favorite thing to say, especially now.
Yep.
But yeah, this one is from the designer, and I think is son of the person that did Dwellings of Eldervale, and it takes a lot of things from that game if you've ever played that one. But yeah, this is a big game. Another big game. If you know Dwellings of Eldervale, that one also is a very big box and has a lot of components, a lot of things going on. The storage system in that one's really, really solid. I'll say
it's big, but I wouldn't say it's it's not heavy.
No, I don't think it's a very heavy game.
In the sense of board games. I mean, like, physically,
right.
Yes, but...
Right. Yeah, they're both for their sizes. I think even this one, too. I think there's a simplicity to them of what you're doing during your turns. If you've never played either of them, I think you're either laying down essentially a worker placement game and taking some sort of action via laying that down. And then there may be a resolution of combat, potentially, depending on where you laid it down and kind of what's out there.
Right.
But yeah, this one's got a pretty nice production quality. You can check out our unboxing video if you want to see all of that. I think it's a pretty long unboxing video because there's a lot in here. So you can go check that out. We should have that going up alongside this. But yeah, we've played this one now 3 times. And part of the reason we played it 3 times was because of what I said earlier. There's a lot of components and stuff in this game. And storage solution isn't terrible, but it's also a little bit of a bear to set up. So once you have it set up, you kind of want to play it maybe multiple times, but at the same time, it's a little bit longer game, so you kind of have to stretch it out over a few days. It's probably not one you want to play like back to back in the same day. I mean, you could, but that'd probably be a lot.
Probably.
Potentially. Yeah. But I don't think like Dwellings of Eldervale either would be one that I would say, I want to play back to back in the same day necessarily.
Right.
But yeah, so we played this one, and I'll say right away, maybe comparing it too much to that one, I think a lot of things did remind me of Dwellings of Eldervale. And then I think, there were some things that I think were done a little bit better, and some things that weren't done quite as good, I think. Okay. So it kind of some pros and cons based on that one. And if you've followed us along the years, especially our top games of all time videos, Dwellings of Eldervale used to be in my top 10, top 5. So this one had a lot to compete with, especially if you also have been following our channel. You know that space theme isn't really a theme that draws me in necessarily.
You're up against it.
Yeah, so this one's gonna have a tough time.
Yeah, I'm more of the space themed kind of, I wouldn't say it's my first choice in theme, but I'm probably a little bit friendlier with space than you are.
Yeah, but yeah, I will say though, even though space is not my favorite theme, a lot of space games are ones that I really love. So I don't know, maybe I just got to get over that part of it. And I think I would add this one to the game of space games that I at least like. Could maybe get to love, but I think I would say one of the reasons. So if you've watched it, Andromeda or Dwellings of Eldervale has also kind of fallen on my list a little bit, and part of that is kind of the end game scoring and just the scoring in general, kind of not necessarily being my favorite. And I don't know that this one does much to change that. I like the scoring a little bit more with the tracks.
Yeah.
I like that quite a bit better. That's one of probably the biggest pros, I think, in this game is instead of it used to be just kind of you'd use certain elements depending on how many players you had in the game, elements, colors, whatever you want to call them, and you'd go up on those specific tracks and then kind of multiply where you are on that track with the number of things you got of that color. So it works, but This one you are still going up tracks specific for specific colors and stuff. But then just the way it scores, I think, was a little more interesting.
Yeah. A little less.
Worked a little bit more. It was because there's like some extra rules. Pepper knows them. He always has to do the scoring. Like if you don't have a certain thing and stuff, you don't count certain ones. I don't know. It was a little strange in Dwellings.
Yeah.
This one didn't have that kind of strangeness to it.
Yeah. I feel like with Dwellings, and I haven't played it as much as you and Pepper, but Dwellings, it's like the initial, the gameplay is good and fine, but then when you get into like those cards that you can like buy, the scoring, some of the things, I was always like, I don't even know, I don't even want to bother to touch those things because they just don't make sense to me. But I also haven't played it probably 5 times even.
And I think so. They did something similar in this game where you can buy. So you've got kind of your base or spaceship, whatever you want to call it, and you've kind of got these 4 categories of tiles, modules you can buy, and those kind of correlate to those colored tracks. So there's the 4 types. There's 4 tracks that are related to that, and there's a 5th track that's related more to combat. But I think it worked way better in this game for those modules than I think it was Doors is what it's called or something that you can get in Dwellings. Because these very similar to Dwellings. So you're either during your turn, like I said, putting out a worker placement thing, or you're collecting all your workers. And in this game, when you collect your workers, you are able to place them and activate things. If you've never played either of these before, and I think this did that a little bit. It was a little easier to understand some of them. Yeah. I think.
And way more accessible than I think some of those cards in Dwellings were.
And you've even got one of the rows where if you activate your main one, it activates every single thing that you have in that row, which I found really... I like that when it's like, it feels really powerful. And then you just have to...
Your faction did that?
No. Oh. The green ones, if you activate your reactor, you get all the rewards. Did you not do that?
We'll have to talk about that after this video.
But yeah, so you get everything in that one. But then, like the rest of them, you don't do that. You'd have to trigger it, and then you can either send another ship if you have one to that same row. Otherwise, once you've activated a row, you can use energy cubes, which you get a bunch of. You can potentially get a bunch of them. That way, when you're activating all of them, to activate kind of those other spaces, as long as you've activated something with a ship in that row. So I think that was just a little funner, cleaner than the Doors. So that was one of the bigger ones, along with the tracks. I think that worked a lot better for me. But then one of the things I think didn't work as well is the end game trigger in this one is just getting to kind of a race to a certain amount of points. Doesn't mean you necessarily win because you'll count end game points and stuff, so it's not a race to win the game for points, but it just triggers the end game, whereas in Dwellings and in this one there are tiles that you can have come out, so additional spaces you can put workers out onto, or ships in this case, and in Dwellings the end game triggers when all of those have been placed out, and in this one it didn't feel like first couple of games we barely put maybe 2 or 3 extra tiles out there outside of what we started with. Way less
real estate to work with.
Right, way out. It just didn't keep freshening the board like it did in that one. Yeah. So I think that was a con in my book, and it felt like the enemies, and maybe we were doing something wrong. I kept looking at the rule book, and it did not seem like we were, but the trigger to that just didn't seem like it was something that we triggered very often to add a new tile. So whereas in Dwellings, there's just an action that you take that kind of triggers it. Yeah.
And then the monster comes out on, like, the tile itself, right?
Right, in Dwellings.
Yeah, but with this one, like, they go to a specific location, and, like, the board is stylized this way, right? So it's built up here at the top, and then it kind of builds out at the bottom. So if you're adding things, they're not necessarily going to be added down here. Right. Like, it's kind of forcing you, if you're not ready to battle those, it's kind of forcing you down, but all the good tiles are up here, or the starting tiles that you can actually do pretty good actions on are up here. So it's like, oh no, I don't want to go down here, and then there's really not much option because you don't get a lot of tiles out, so
Right.
you're pretty forced to handle combat, I feel like, in this one. Whereas I feel like in Dwellings, you maybe can get a little bit away from it.
Yeah, and I think...
Which combat isn't a bad thing. It's just...
Right.
Could force you, if you lose, into some plans you didn't anticipate.
Right, and one of the things that made me love Dwellings is the combat. I will say that system is something I really enjoy, where it's like you feel like you have a chance even when you're not rolling a lot of dice. We found that out in this one. It has a very similar combat, where sometimes you're just not rolling well. You're not going to win, but sometimes you just have to roll a couple good things and you can win even if you're facing something that's a little bit more powerful than you. Kind of can swing either way. But it's just, a combat system where you roll a certain amount of dice and then you look at the highest valued die, and then if there's a tie, then it goes to the next highest value until someone breaks that tie. So I really like how that works. And in this one, they added kind of another element where you get to re-roll under a certain values, depending on how many ships you had in there. And I think that was a good, interesting thing that they added. That it takes a little bit of that, maybe like, oh, I rolled terribly, away from it. It could give you a few re-rolls if you were putting more effort into this battle. So I do like that they did that, but I just felt like, and maybe we should have attacked each other more, I don't know, but it didn't feel like the combat in this one happened quite as much, probably because we'd only put monsters out when we had a new tile, and we didn't add many, so there weren't many monsters we had throughout the game.
No.
So once they were defeated, they were just kind of no monsters there, so the only way you could battle is if you were going after other players, which maybe, we played all of our games at 2 players, so maybe if you were playing at 4 players, I guess then you'd probably have to battle, because there's only so many tiles.
Only so many tiles.
I think you actually put more out with more players, but
okay.
Still, I mean, you'd probably want to take some of the same actions, so you'd be kind of forced to, I think. But yeah, it's still a system I really like with the battling. I just wish in this one it happened a little bit more. And I feel like the monsters and dwellings were easier to understand than maybe the ones in this game.
Yeah.
Like some of the things that they did were, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wasn't as interesting as dwellings, I think.
There's a lot of content with this game too, and I felt like, we just kind of struggled a little bit with like really honing in on like particular pieces on rules and stuff. So that probably made our first game very very slow.
It was very slow, very long.
Yeah.
But yeah, after 3 plays, I would say I still enjoy this one, and I think it'll give you a similar experience. So if you never had the chance to try Dwellings, but you were always interested in it, but you really love space theme, I think you're going to get a very similar feeling from this game. So I would recommend getting this one. I would just recommend whichever theme appeals to you more, because I think they're close enough that I don't know that I would
recommend this one.
This one?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But we know I struggle with Dwellings, with the scoring and all of that. This was much more approachable, I think, from that mentality. Yeah.
I think also the last but not least, I think the factions in this one, as long as I remembered to do things, they seemed a little bit more interesting than maybe the ones in Dwellings. Because there was more, I feel like those focused more on like specific worker types. Because in that one you got multiple workers. In this one you have multiple ships, but it didn't necessarily... You get a special ship based on what you pick, but your faction itself just has a different ability that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your ships. Yeah. Which I liked.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was good. So what'd you rate? Did you rate it?
Probably give it like an 8. Maybe 7.75.
Ooh, splitting 0.25 hairs.
Pepper said MaKayla wouldn't do a 0.25.
No.
That's what he said when I was talking to him about what I thought you'd rate this.
That's dumb.
So yeah, it's probably there. I'm trying to think if it would likely go up or not. There's just, I don't know. There's just some things in it that, and I think I've seen it in Dwellings now too. I like the idea of dwelling, and it has a similar thing in this one too, where you try to claim spots and build buildings in it. I do really like that. I think that's really cool. But then, yeah, there's just some things in it that, like the scoring mainly, I think it just kind of hurts it a bit for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's almost a complete package. It's just really hard to put your thumb on, like, what's, like, there's just something that's not in there, and you can't quite put your finger on it. So, I would probably give it a 6 to 7 range. So, I mean,
potentially a little higher than I thought, actually. I was thinking of a 5.
Yeah, that was
5 to
mediocre, 6. Take it or leave it. But I would err more on the side of, like, I'd be willing to play it if you guys brought it out. I'd be more willing to play this than Dwellings. Like, if you said you want to play one of these two, I'd be like, that one. So yeah, I by the third game, I was getting the groove of it, but I think the replayability probably isn't super there for me. Unfortunately, you are just going for points, and there's pretty straightforward ways about that. And so, but I mean, I both like that, and we played it 3 times in a row without like anything in between. So it was like, okay, yep. I know what to do.
Right.
I know what to do this time. You take this out in 6 months, I'll be like, all right, how do we?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
there?
I think it felt better with each play we had of it. It kind of got better for me. Just because, like you said, that first play it took us like 3 hours, which was like
we were real slow to get started, like terrible. But by the third game, I was like, doesn't even matter how many resources I have, just go.
It's kind of a weird thing though, because
gain them along the way.
Because like when I said like, oh, we maybe should have battled each other more, like I think that could be a thing that would. I think it's tough because it's like. That's the only way to stop people from getting those points, which is what triggers the end of the game.
If you lose, then you got to spend a turn getting stuff repaired.
But there's limited amounts of spaces to take. So I think, unfortunately, though, I think at the same time that could prolong the game.
Maybe
that's why I'm not really sure.
Lost all 3 times, but even you never aggressed on me like one time. I was the aggressor in like the one combat
I know you went and took me out and took my spot that I moved
and
the enemies out of the way.
I still didn't win the stupid game.
I even moved the enemies out of the way so I could take it, but instead you're like, oh, thank you very much.
Exactly. Like, what does he think? That I'm just not going to do it? It's wide open.
Wow.
Yeah,
and then you didn't even have the stuff you needed to do it.
It didn't serve me because I didn't win.
But yeah, overall, I think it's a solid game.
Yeah.
And it's one worth at least trying out, I think, especially if you do like worker placement style games and you really love space. This one is definitely right up there.
Pretty epic.
Definitely go check out the unboxing video because it's got really high quality production, great components.
Very own dice trays.
Yes. But yeah, note, I guess, even though no one's probably listening at this point, do note that this one is like the Kickstarter version. So I guess I don't know if they're like a retail version is way different, but I think this is the Deluxify versions. So note that. But otherwise, we appreciate it if you made it this far. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and as always, don't forget to keep on nibbling on our content.